My name is Nora Callahan. I'm 38 years old. I'm a pediatric nurse in Portland, Oregon, and I have a son named Eli who just turned 7 and still asks me to read the same 3 books every single night before bed, even though he has them memorized word for word. I also have a husband named James who is kind and steady, and the reason I stayed sane through most of what I am about to tell you. And I had a mother-in-law named Patricia Whitmore who called me Nicole for 7 years. Not a slip, not a habit she was trying to break, a choice. A quiet, consistent, deliberate choice she made every single time she looked at me, as if using my actual name would be some kind of concession she wasn't willing to make. I want to tell you this story the way it actually happened, not the version where I was endlessly patient and understanding, because I wasn't, and not the version where I snapped dramatically in a restaurant and threw a bread roll, because that's not how it ended either. The truth is slower and stranger and more satisfying than either of those. The truth is that it ended at a dinner table in front of 14 people on the night Patricia Whitmore finally met her match. And the match was me. I met James in 2011 at a hospital fundraiser where neither of us wanted to be. He was there because his firm had bought a table. I was there because my supervisor had guilted 3 of us into representing the nursing staff. We ended up at opposite ends of the same table and spent the entire dinner making almost eye contact over a centerpiece that was aggressively too tall. Afterward, he found me at the coat check and said, "I spent $400 on a plate of salmon just to meet someone interesting. At least let me get your number." I gave it to him, partly because it was a good line, mostly because he had the kind of face that was just on the edge of handsome, where everything slightly imperfect makes it more interesting instead of less. We dated for 1.5 years before I met his parents. That should have told me something. James always had a reason why the timing wasn't right. A work trip, a family conflict, his mother's back. I didn't push, because things were good between us, and I didn't want to manufacture problems. But I filed it away. When we finally went, it was for Christmas. His family lived in a large colonial house in a suburb of Boston that looked like someone had built it specifically to feel intimidating. I remember standing in the driveway in December cold, breath visible, thinking, "You're a grown woman with a graduate degree and good shoes. Pull it together." Patricia opened the door before we knocked. She was impeccably dressed in a way that made me feel like she had been waiting to evaluate me, not greet me. She hugged James first, long and tight, the way mothers hug sons they feel they don't see enough. Then she turned to me with a smile that went exactly to the edge of warmth without crossing it.
"Nicole," she said, "finally." James said, "Mom, this is Nora." She blinked, as if he had said something mildly confusing, and ushered us inside. At dinner, she called me Nicole again, and again. Once while passing rolls, once in a direct question, once while telling a story that involved me peripherally. James corrected her each time, patiently, with the tone of someone correcting an autocorrect error. "Nora, Mom." "Right, of course," she said, each time, with a little laugh and no real apology, and then continued the story. His father, Robert, called me Nora correctly from the first moment, and never slipped once, which told me immediately that this was not a memory issue. By the end of the trip, I had been called Nicole 11 times. I counted. James and I talked about it on the drive home. He apologized. He said she did this sometimes, that she had trouble with names, that she didn't mean anything by it. I told him I didn't think it was accidental. He went quiet, in the careful way people go quiet when they suspect you're right, but aren't ready to say so out loud. I let it go for the trip, but not in my mind. We got engaged the following spring. I called his mother to tell her myself, woman to woman, because I was trying to build something. She was gracious and enthusiastic on the phone,
She said she was thrilled. She said she had always known James would find someone wonderful. She called me Nicole 3 times during that phone call. I said, "Patricia, I do want to mention, my name is Nora. I know you know, and I'm sure it's just habit, but I would love it if you could try." There was a pause. Not long, maybe 2 seconds. And then she said pleasantly, "Of course, dear, you're completely right." And then a beat later, "Now, Nicole, have you and James thought about a date yet?" I sat with the phone pressed against my ear and made a decision in that moment. I was not going to become a woman who went to war with her mother-in-law before the wedding, but I was also not going to pretend the battle wasn't happening. I was going to document. I was going to be patient, and I was going to wait.
We married in September 2013. It was a small outdoor ceremony. 60 people, fairy lights and wildflowers, and the kind of evening that smells like warm grass and something you can't name, but want to hold on to. My mother danced badly and with full commitment. James cried when I walked in and pretended he hadn't. I wore my grandmother's earrings and felt, for most of the night, like myself. Patricia gave a toast. She thanked James for finding someone who clearly makes him happy. She talked about the family she had raised, the values she had tried to pass on. She held up her glass and said, "To James and his Nicole." Not his Nora, his Nicole. James went stiff beside me. His father looked at the table. I smiled and drank my champagne. That was the night I started keeping notes. Not in an obsessive way, just a small file on my phone. Date, location, what was said, who was present. I didn't share it with James at first. I didn't want to put him in the middle more than he already was. But I wanted a record, because I knew what was happening, and I knew that when it finally mattered, I was going to need to prove I wasn't the one who had started it. The years went on. James talked to his mother many times, gently at first, then less gently. She would always agree that she needed to do better. She would sometimes go several weeks without a slip. Then a family gathering would happen, or a phone call, or a holiday, and Nicole would reappear. I watched the pattern carefully. She used Nora when James was in the room and paying attention. She used Nicole when he was distracted, in another room, out of earshot. It was that exact. It was that calculated. Whatever she told herself about it, the evidence was clear. This was not confusion. This was a message delivered in plausible deniability. The message was, you are not permanent here. You are not the name I chose for my son's life. You are a presence I am tolerating, not one I am accepting. I heard the message. I just chose when to respond. We had Eli in 2017, and something shifted after that. Patricia's attention swiveled toward her grandson with a warmth and consistency I had honestly never seen directed at me. She was a good grandmother, I will say that clearly. She remembered Eli's food preferences and bought the exact right books, and never once called him the wrong name. But the Nicole thing continued, even as Eli grew old enough to notice. He was 4 when he first said something. We were at Patricia's house for Thanksgiving, and she called me Nicole while telling me something about the turkey. Eli, who had been coloring at the kitchen table, looked up and said, "Grandma, Mommy's name is Nora." Patricia laughed. "You're right, sweetheart. Silly Grandma." She looked at me with an expression I can only describe as a dare. That was the moment I decided the waiting was over. Not because my 4-year-old had to correct his grandmother on my behalf, though that part stung in a specific, deep way, but because he said it so matter-of-factly, like it was obvious, like the answer was easy. And it was obvious. It was easy. It was only hard for one person, and that person was choosing for it to be hard. I went home that night and opened my notes file.
4 years and 8 months of entries, 112 documented incidents. I read through all of them, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, something quieter than anger. The feeling you get when you've been holding a door open for a very long time and you finally decide to let it close. I made a plan. The opportunity came in March 2020, right before the world changed shape. Patricia organized a dinner at her house to celebrate Robert's retirement. James and I, his sister Claire and her husband Todd, Patricia's 2 closest friends from the garden club, Robert's former business partner and his wife, and a few cousins. 14 people total. This was the moment I had been waiting for, and I want to be honest about why I chose a public setting. Not for cruelty. I have thought about this a lot, and I believe my reasons were fair. Patricia had used public settings for years to deliver the Nicole message, because she knew I wouldn't make a scene. She depended on my restraint in exactly the places where the audience mattered most to her. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every party with garden club friends, that was where the message landed loudest. I decided that if she chose that stage, then that stage was where the answer would come from. I told James my plan the night before. I want to be clear about that. I did not ambush my husband. I sat across from him at our kitchen table and said, "Tomorrow night, if she calls me Nicole in front of everyone again, I'm not going to correct her quietly. I'm going to handle it differently, and I need you to let me." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What are you going to do?" I told him. He looked at me steadily and said, "Okay." That was all. Just okay. That one word is one of the reasons I love him. The dinner started the way those dinners always started. Patricia in a silk blouse, house immaculate, candles lit, the kind of effort that is also a statement. Robert was genuinely happy, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen him before. Retirement suited him. The food was good, the conversation was warm. And then, 40 minutes in, Patricia started telling a story about a family vacation from when James was a teenager. It was a good story, well told, and at a certain point, I entered it. And Nicole, the table kept moving. No one blinked. This was the thing about public Nicole moments. They passed so fast that people who didn't know the history barely registered them. But this time, I did not let it pass. I put down my fork. I did it quietly, no clatter, just a small, deliberate pause. "Patricia," I said, warm voice, easy voice, the voice I use with frightened children at the hospital when I need them to trust me. "I want to make sure I understand something, and I'm asking sincerely. Is my name Nicole?" The table went still. Patricia blinked. "Of course not," she said. "I misspoke." "Okay," I said, "because I've been keeping track, and in the last 7 years, you've called me Nicole 113 times. Tonight makes 114. Someone at the end of the table made a small sound. I have the dates," I said. "I have the locations. I have who was present. Not because I wanted to use it, but because I wanted to be sure I wasn't imagining it. And it turns out, I was not imagining it." Patricia's face had done something complicated. She opened her mouth. I kept going, still in that calm voice. "I'm not angry. I'm not here to ruin Robert's evening. And I want to say very clearly that I think he's wonderful, and I'm glad he's retiring, and I hope the next chapter is everything he wants it to be." Robert made a small sound that might have been a laugh. "But I have been your daughter-in-law for 7 years. I have been in this family for over a decade. I am the mother of your grandson, who last November corrected you on my name himself. because even a 4-year-old understood that it mattered. And I have spent 7 years allowing you to send a message, in a word, in a name that wasn't mine, because I believed patience was the right response. I picked my fork back up. I've decided patience has an expiration date. My name is Nora. I would like you to use it. Not because James has asked you to, and not to make peace. Because it's my name. Because I exist in this family. Because I am not a guest in my own marriage. The table was completely silent. Patricia looked at James. James looked at his plate. His sister Claire said, quietly, "Mom, she's right." Patricia said nothing for a long moment. Her face was doing several things at once. And then, and this was the part I had not expected, she put her napkin down and said, "You counted." I did. 114. Yes. Another silence. Then she said, very quietly, looking not at me but at the candle in the center of the table, "I suppose I owe you an apology." It was not a big apology. It wasn't tearful or dramatic. It was small and a little stiff, and it came out like something she had to push past a door to reach.
But it was real. I said, "Thank you, Patricia." And that was it. We finished dinner. Robert told 3 more retirement stories. Claire poured more wine. The friends from the garden club found something to look at on the ceiling for a while, and then rejoined the conversation. Patricia called me Nora for the rest of the evening. She has called me Nora every time since. I want to be honest about what did and didn't change after that night. Patricia and I did not become close. We are not friends in the way I am friends with the women I actually chose. We are polite. We are civil. We are, I think, genuinely respectful of each other, in the way people become respectful when the pretending stops. She knows I was paying attention. I think knowing that changed something in how she saw me. I was not the quiet woman who absorbed everything and said nothing. I was the woman who documented 114 incidents and waited 7 years for the right moment to say something, clearly, in front of everyone, without raising her voice. James said, a few weeks later, that his mother had called him after the dinner, that she had said I was formidable. He thought that was the most honest thing she had ever said about me. Robert pulled me aside at Easter and shook my hand.
I think about what I would tell a woman who was where I was at the beginning, who was absorbing small, deliberate cruelties and calling it keeping the peace, who was telling herself she is choosing her battles wisely, when really she is just tired and afraid of becoming the problem. Here is what I would say. You are not keeping the peace. You are funding it. You are paying for someone else's comfort with pieces of your own dignity, and the bill keeps coming, and the price keeps going up. And one day, your 4-year-old will correct your mother-in-law on your name, and you will realize you have been waiting for permission that was never going to come. You do not need permission. You need a plan and patience and the absolute clarity of knowing exactly what you're talking about when you finally speak. People who use plausible deniability as a weapon are counting on you to doubt yourself. They are counting on, maybe she really does forget, and maybe I'm being too sensitive, and maybe this isn't worth the fight. The moment you know, really know, with dates and evidence and a 4-year-old's innocent testimony, the deniability dissolves, and what's left is just the truth. The truth, in my case, was simple. My name is Nora Callahan. I have been here all along. I was patient because I chose to be, not because I had to be. And when I finally stopped being patient,
14 people at a dinner table learned the difference.